right, we're going to go ahead and get going as Mr. Wandro tries to get my ancient laptop to wake up a little bit. So, nonprofit life, right? Hi, everybody. I'm Gail Brubaker. I'm the executive director for the West Des Moines Historical Society, and I am proud to launch the second in our series of Iowa Files. This is the fourth year for it. We do this in partnership with the West Des Moines Public Library, EMC Insurance Foundation, the Iowa Arts Council, and members and donors like you. So if you like what we do, please think about throwing a buck or two in the plastic box in the back. Our presenter today is somebody who has a fantasy job, I think, for a lot of us, especially my husband. He gets to design and play on golf courses, and he gets paid to do it. So how awesome would that be? That would be like me being a professional champagne taster and dog and cat cuddler. So Mr. Wandro is a golf course builder, architect, and consultant. He is based here in Iowa. He works for Renaissance Golf Design and Brian Schneider. Joe is currently building the highly anticipated Lido and Sedge Valley courses in the Sand Valley Golf Resort in central Wisconsin. Other efforts include consulting work at clubs in Illinois and Wisconsin. Joe spends his free time playing classical music and studying golf history. So, did you know that Waveland is the oldest municipal golf course west of the Mississippi? It has a very storied past. My husband plays on it as often as he can and says the hills will kill you. So, Mr. Wandro, if you are ready to start, please go right ahead.
Yes. I identify three big eras I'm going to talk about in Waveland's history. The Victorian era, this is a disputed date range, but I'm going to call it 1890 to 1915. I'm going to call it the Victorian era of Waveland. The second era, I put 1915 to 1925 to 1965, and I call that the Great Depression in golf's golden age. That's where we get most of what we have at Waveland today. It was in that golden age of golf. And then the last section I'll talk about, last time period, is basically about the interstate. It's the interstate comes to the golf course and everything changes. And I think of that as Waveland's decline because the course has gotten worse, in my view, in that time period. Before we talk about any of the time periods, let's just kind of orient ourselves in the land. 190 acres. I've seen reports that the city bought it. I've seen reports that it was donated. I don't know which is true. The city takes control about 1890. They're looking at building a military base there. They never do. Or military training grounds. They never do. So it's just a kind of an open pasture park for the first 10 years. And then golfers decide, hey, we want to use this. But so I wasn't talking about the land. So the city of Des Moines sits kind of, I think of it as kind of a high prairie. It's about 960 feet above sea level. But then the city falls away down to the river valleys. You have the Des Moines River and the Raccoon River. So Waveland kind of bridges the high prairie down to Walnut Creek, Raccoon River. So you see in the corner, it's about 960 feet. And by the time you get down by 56th Street, you've gone about 100 feet down. So when we're talking about Waveland and the big hills, we're talking about 100-foot relief, which is big. And I have a coworker who didn't know anything about Waveland, but he's like, oh yeah, he's from Kentucky, and he's like, oh yeah, Waveland's one of those washboard hills courses. I don't know how he knew that, but he was right. The purple. So I did outline kind of the watershed. So we talked about the creek earlier that runs into like a big retention pond. So the red represent the low points in the watershed, and the green, it's really faint with this light, but they represent the high points. I thought that might be interesting to see how little flat land there is. No, it's okay. Yeah, but you can see this is a topographical map, and you can see the washboard effect in the land. I mean, it's been eroded away down to the Walnut Creek Valley. All right. So, oops, I got to click this. The first period of Waveland's history I call Victorian. Oh boy, man. Sorry for the technical difficulties. That might take a while to load. While that loads, I have an interview I want to play for you about early golf and what it might have been like to play really early Victorian golf. You can see a picture here. There's not much to it. I call it in the next slide a big game of croquet. I mean, you're not hitting the ball very far. The balls were not standardized, or they weren't made of rubber or a sturdy material yet. They were still stuffed, so they didn't go very far. They're using hickory shafted clubs, and they're playing on really rough golf courses that probably just mown circles in the pasture. Let's see if this interview pops up here. $7:30. All right. There it is.
I'm disagreeing, for example. I'm already upset. When I find my ball in the bunker, I'm really upset.
Go to 7:30 here. So they're going to talk a little bit about, this early idea of golf. What does a really rudimentary golf in the United States look like, and who are the people playing it?
The factors in American culture that led to the rise of the golf-focused country club. What were kind of those impulses that drove?
In this interview, they're talking about early country clubs, but you can roll Waveland into that. It wasn't a different kind of golf being played at the country clubs at that point. So they're going to talk about country clubs, and you can just put municipal golf in there as well because it looked the same.
Were kind of those impulses that drove people to want to participate in something like this?
Well, I think that there are a number of them, and they're sort of it's hard to arrange it by importance. But health was an important one. That the cities of the late 19th century were pretty ghastly places. And again, hard for us to imagine. The disease was much more common, and there was certainly the idea that you wanted to participate, horses and carriages and stuff. There are all kinds of subtle influences, but it was also, and a lot of historians have talked about this, it was a time when everybody was forming clubs for everything. There was a lot of associations. One, I think that somebody's used the phrase an era of associations. I think the bar associations all are formed. The American Medical Association is formed during this period. All kinds of, I think the Boy Scouts were formed during this period. And there was the idea that you could improve your life by being in these associations. They could provide clubhouses and they could provide events. One suspects they could provide romance. Men and women met one another. And if you look at individual towns, I know that a student of mine wrote a really good paper.
I'll stop that, and then I'm going to jump forward a little bit in this interview. But what they're talking about is, I mean, what was driving people to play golf? And I think he makes it pretty clear that people just wanted to be outside, escape city life, and hobbyists and people who liked club life, club social life. This was the time for them, and they formed a lot of these different associations to keep their social lives busy, and that was very much in vogue at that time. I'm going to jump forward to the interview. 27:30.
think there's a couple of things. One is it was Scottish. Now, whether it was or not, you can get an argument, but things Scottish were just deemed to be acceptable. Then I think it had the allure that anybody could play the game. That you didn't have to be a big male. You didn't have to be fast. And I think it really good question is it benefits a little bit from being totally nonviolent. And I've played golf for 70 years. I doubt you could tell me a sport that I could play for 70 years. I'm certainly not going to play football for 70 years, or baseball, or basketball, or hockey.
So the important point he's making here is that golf is inherently different than other sports. And it provided this option if you didn't want to play a violent sport at that time period. It was an attractive option you could switch to. All right. Well, so as I kind of talked about, it's a big game of croquet. Physical characteristics of how they were playing the game. They had these are hickory shafted clubs. The ball doesn't go very far. The courses are much shorter. I don't know if you guys know specifics of golf hole lengths, but today a par 4 might be 400. Back then they were playing par 4s at 270. So not half the size, but certainly not up to today's standards of how far the ball goes today. Other Victorian golf courses you could investigate in Iowa are Algona Country Club, Elmwood Country Club, and Marshalltown. And then a really interesting one is on the east side of Des Moines called Grandview. It was built a year after Waveland, and it has not changed at all. So you can go there and still the holes are 270, 300 yards long. That's the same golf course. I don't think there's been any major changes to that golf course in 120 years. So that's an interesting place to see what Victorian golf looked like. So Waveland is special. Like Gail mentioned, it was the first muni west of the Mississippi. But even more importantly, it was the third municipal course in the United States. So there was one in Boston, there was one in Detroit, and Waveland was third. It seems like kind of an aberration, but other interesting things, that golf was free for at least the first 10 or 15 years. There was no cost to play. And then it was laid out. You could call him the architect. I don't know that there was much design done. It was just laying out where the holes would go. It was done by Warren Dickinson, who was an engineer in Des Moines. And he was a prominent member of the first Des Moines Country Club, which was directly south of Waveland today. If you go back on the streets south of the interstate, you'll see Country Club Boulevard, and you'll see references to a country club, but there's no golf. It's just a neighborhood. And that's because Des Moines Golf was originally directly south of Waveland. Keep going here. So here's some early pictures. They're not great. This is in the 20s because the observatory was built in 1924, but certainly a lot less trees on the golf course. It was a pasture. Yeah, I think this might have been in the winter or something. But you can see it's very rudimentary. There's not pristine fairways or even pristine greens at this point, even in the 20s. Do a few more. That's the observatory. Yeah.
You know, when everything in Des Moines was on the east side,
Okay.
and they didn't start moving west until early 50s.
Yeah, I have
They're
some.
moving west.
I have some maps that show the growth.
Is being developed when everything was on the east side of Des Moines.
I think it was just either it was donated or the city got a good price for it.
Because you think of how far they traveled to get I mean, when you think of the east side,
Yeah.
everything was by Drake and that. and
Yep.
For them to travel that distance.
Well, this is very close to Drake.
Yeah.
It's only maybe 10 city blocks from Drake, so it's not far. Here's another early picture. No golf carts yet, which is nice. But it's an open pasture at this point. And here's a later picture where the trees start coming in. And there's a very early picture. I don't even know what hole that is. I can't figure it out, but this looks like they were in construction in this picture. And that's the 9th hole today, which really hasn't changed at all. So this was the first clubhouse. They call it Waveland Golf Club because there was a club at the golf course, but it wasn't a club golf course, if that makes sense. It wasn't a country club, but there was a golfing club that held events at Waveland. So they wanted to build a clubhouse. This was their design. And it looks to me like they built the half size of their design or something. I'm not sure why. I couldn't find any information about a lack of funds or something, but it looks like about half the size of the plans. And this would have been very near to where the tennis courts are today, if you know that area. Right on the eastern boundary of the golf course. Keep going here. So here's a map someone drew of the course in the 20s. And there's some interesting things to point out. You see a picnic grounds. So my hunch is, and I think this is kind of what they were getting to in that interview, is people just wanted to be outside. And this idea that you had a golf course that was just there for golf didn't make sense yet. Or golf was something you did at the park almost. So the line between being out and camping and golfing might not have been very delineated. You could have gone from taking a stroll to playing one hole to going back to your walk. I don't think it was very rigid, I should say. But another interesting thing is there are 27 holes in this early design or early layout. This is 56th Street today. Up here is University, and they had a road that bisected and then went up the north side. So there were roads going through the golf course. You had a beginner's course, which is interesting, of 9 holes. And then you had a full 18 set around those beginner holes. Yeah. So I think in their diagram, they're thinking that the tee boxes are these straight lines against the long line, and then the greens are the squares. But some of them then are round too. And then some of them have 2 greens. So I haven't figured out everything in this, but I think it's interesting. And then if you want to kind of get a sense of what the clubhouse or meeting grounds look like, if we go back one slide, you can see pavilion. There's a pavilion there, and I think the clubhouse is right here. And that would have been kind of where the synagogue is today, near Polk Boulevard. But you can see the pavilion where you could watch golfers, probably some caddy shacks right here, or places, a pro shop to keep extra clubs. Then you have the clubhouse over to the right. So people could just drive right up. There were 2 roads that you could just drive right up to the clubhouse through the course. And here's another picture. Not very interesting, but all right, we reached the next age of Waveland's development, and that's the golden age. This is a famous hole in Wisconsin, kind of exemplifies what golden age architecture in golf looks like. So I call I would date the golden age between about 1915 and then start of World War II. Most famous courses you've heard of are from the golden age: Augusta National, Pebble Beach. I have a few more up there. And then we have Iowa examples of Golden Age courses: Wakanda on the south side of Des Moines, Davenport, Cedar Rapids, and then Iowa State. It's called Vinker Memorial Golf Course today at Iowa State. And then these are the architects that worked on those various courses. An interesting thing in this time period is these are all professionals now. So whereas we go back a period, these courses are laid out by amateurs. It's becoming a professional business now. So they're men who travel with teams and run construction companies to build courses, which is a big change from the time period before. Like I said, professionally designed, strategic options. The game becomes more detailed and strategic in that hitting it in different spots now have certain risk rewards. This is a hole in Kansas, and you can tell it has a different level of artistry than the first pictures we were looking at Waveland. I think we covered most of, yeah. And you can see they've made huge strides in how they shape and contour the land. To get the greens to have that kind of roll and contour takes someone who knows what they're doing. Whereas the early Waveland greens were probably just cut into the pasture circles. These are being manufactured, some of them to look natural, some of them not. But here are a few more pictures of Golden Age courses. You can jump through these. I just wanted to explain what a strategic hole means in this era. This is a famous hole in Los Angeles at Riviera. And we call it strategic because the green has a very specific angle it's set at. So the golfer can choose, hey, I want to drive my ball here to get the angle. Or maybe they want to get greedy and they miss their spot, and now they don't have the angle. So the architecture has become more detailed and more interesting, in that you can hit it in the right spot, you can hit it in the wrong spot. And that'll be important for Waveland's next evolution. So why was there a golf boom in this era? Economy was strong. It was really easy to borrow money to build courses and pay people in this period. Golfers are getting a lot better, and the tools you play golf with were getting more streamlined and more consistent. So the level of golf being played was much higher. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from, you know what, I'm going to skip that actually. It's my belief that there were calls to change Waveland around 1930 because you had these other golf courses in Iowa that really took the bar up in terms of these were really well designed, really well thought of, and they were attracting big tournaments. So you had these country clubs getting a lot of attention, and I think people playing Waveland felt that their course was falling behind. So you start to see hints that the city is considering changing Waveland to meet the higher bar that's been set. Keep going here. And what I mean, okay. The biggest issue with these Victorian courses, like I said, the balls were getting better, the clubs. The lengths of holes no longer fit the golf that was being played. So this is some holes over at Grandview on the east side that hasn't been changed since 1902. And the problem is you have people teeing off and their ball might get here on a par 4. And then the next group has to wait until they clear the green, because you can almost drive a par 4. So what you have is golfers stacking up on the tees, waiting for the golfers to get out of the way because the holes are so short. And at Grandview, you have hole after hole of that distance. So there gets to be a lot of congestion. And I think that was the biggest complaint people had about the early Waveland Golf Course. So here's some clippings from these are Des Moines Register. a designer is floated. You start seeing his name in the papers around 1932 or 1931. Paul Coates, his name's Paul Coates, and he's being considered to change the course. I'll keep going here. It's the Depression, so you have these New Deal agencies that are making big loans to municipalities, and Waveland takes advantage of that. And they hire this Coates guy from Minnesota, and I'll get to him more, but essentially the WPA program hires 200 men that are going to build Waveland. I showed you the picture earlier in the presentation, but that money just goes to paying those men to build the course, and that's how the city gets it done. Because before that, they really didn't have any money to improve the golf course. Paul Coates is the architect at this era. He was an engineer from Minnesota. He has some good designs in Minnesota, and he was also here to help grade the airport, which is interesting. So it seems like, I don't know whether golf was his first business interest or whether it was to make money building the airport. I'm not sure, but most people in the business think that he was competent. He wasn't a big name or a great architect, but he was definitely competent. Here are a few pictures of construction. This is actually a movable lumber mill, portable sawmill. Cutting down some trees. They leveled some fairways. And I think all they're using is mules and a blade to make these earth changes and to shape the earth. I don't think they had any technology beyond that. They had some trucks, as you can see in this picture, but definitely no bulldozers yet. Workers go on strike while building Waveland, which is kind of interesting. They were promised a certain number of hours and they didn't get it, so they walked off the job. And the course takes a long time to build. They start in 1930, I think in 34, and they're not done until 1938. The course, or 37, the course doesn't open. So here's that first picture we looked at. You can see it's just teams of men with wheelbarrows. I think what they're doing here is working on drainage down to that big pond, but it's hard to know. There's another picture of them building the pond, or enlarging the pond. So the clubhouse today sits up here. This would be the 18th green today. All right, so what does Coates produce? This is his design for Waveland, most of which is there today. So when you go play Waveland, you're playing mostly Coates' course. This is a diagram I found in the register and pretty well matches what you see. This is an aerial photo taken in the 50s. So you can see his design was realized. I mean, the holes he laid out were constructed. Notably today, 15th hole is the same. It slithers down the eastern side of the course. Yeah, most of the bones for the course are a product of 1932 in this design. Just another diagram. I put the green holes are basically exactly what he designed. The red holes no longer exist, or the red holes today were not Coates' design. And the blue lines are edited Coates holes. So together, the blue and the green show you that most of the course is still his. And they get a new clubhouse built. It's a Tudor style clubhouse, I'm not sure. I think it was 38. But they were definitely very proud of this because this was a stately clubhouse for a municipality. I think I'm going to skip this for time, but it's a newspaper clipping where this sports writer is just kind of nostalgically talking about the course flipping over, or the new course being opened, and he laments the old course before the changes were made. Here's another picture playing up toward the observatory. So this hole still exists. It has a lot more trees on it, but this is the 11th hole today, playing west with the observatory out to the right. All right, so in this era, what happens? Waveland gets longer. The holes get significantly longer. I think the total yardage was around 5,000 before this plan, 5,000 yards long. And after the plan, it's about 6,400 yards. So it gets a lot longer. If you think about playing golf, sometimes your ball is near the horizon. So the early course, a lot of those holes were east to west, which is a problem because early in the morning, you're hitting into the sun. You can't see it. Late in the day, you're hitting into the sun. You can't see it. So something that happened was north-south holes, many more north-south holes after Coates worked on it. And that's probably to get out of the sun for those early golfers and late golfers. There's a great variety of holes that he comes up with: short, long, turning left, turning right. Works with the land pretty well. Instead of playing up and over hills, Coates, in my opinion, goes through valleys more, the natural valleys that are present at Waveland. So I think the walk is actually, or the course he built, the walk wasn't that bad. I think it's gotten worse over time, more strenuous over time. And as we saw in those pictures, there's a ton of width, meaning the fairways are really wide, and we can kind of see it there. Waveland's known for being a very treed golf course today. That's not how he designed it. It was very open. So we can skip this. Oh, this is a green that doesn't exist anymore. So in the golden age of golf, there's this template hole, or a repeated hole you see over and over, a punch bowl. So it's just a fun way to see the ball collect on a green. It creates diversity in the round. If you have a lot of greens that are sloping away, and then you get to one where everything feeds into the same spot, it's a nice change of pace. So there was a punch bowl hole at Waveland. You can kind of see the 3 here. Was the 3rd hole back then. Now it's the 12th, and the green is over here. But they did have a punch bowl, and here's a picture of them building it. So they cored out a hillside and made a big bowl into it, which I thought was pretty cool. It's still a walking game at this point. So this is a bridge that was built between today's 14th and 15th holes. Then I found another picture of it in the 70s. It was still there, but it's not there today. Now there's just a cart path that goes down the valley and back up. I consider Waveland a Golden Age adjacent course. It's not a masterwork as far as golf courses in general. Some characteristics of Golden Age courses: strategic options. There was some of that in Coates' design. Definitely a natural walk, which correlates with Golden Age courses. But really where it differs is the land shaping. I found no evidence that really skilled professionals were contouring and shaping the greens, building. I couldn't find any evidence of bunkers. I just don't think it was very refined. I think it was those New Deal workers kind of figuring out on the fly how to build a course. And yeah, that's where it differs from other Golden Age classic courses. So this is the final era that I think we're still in at Waveland, and that's post-construction of 235. That completely changed the golf course. So I call that the post-war era, or the modern era of Waveland. Cultural forces at this time, it's baby boom, everyone wants to play golf, the war is over, people want to live the good life, and a ton of golf courses are getting built, and quickly. So I did a little survey of just courses built in the Des Moines metro area between 1950 and 2000, and I found 19. So that's, I think every 26, 27 months, there's a new golf course in that time period, which kind of shows you how quickly they were going up. Yeah, I think all of these are still, there might be one or two that are no longer, but I think these are all still in operation. This era is also about TV. You can watch the Masters now on TV, and that changes everything because country club members, the general golfing public, think that a course should be emerald green, and that should be refined, and it should be perfect. And that's not really how golf was before then. But this changes how courses are built, and eventually is going to change Waveland. The business changes in that it doesn't matter necessarily if you're building a great golf hole, but can you get it green really easily, and can you maintain it really easily? So the goal of a golf course architect in this era changes. It's about building a course quickly because there's a lot of business, and it's about making something that's practical. They kind of scoffed at the Golden Age courses and said, well, they're artistic and they're interesting, but we can't make money like that. And they were looking to put up courses quickly. So that's the era we're in now, or that's the era that began in the 50s, I would say. And here's a picture of Augusta, which it's unrealistic for most courses to look like that. So it's decided that the freeway is coming through, and the easiest way to get through this part of Des Moines is to cut through the golf course, because you won't have to use eminent domain. There won't be angry homeowners. There might be, but you can see in this picture, this is the old Waveland layout that Coates put down in 32. And you can see the freeway is going to snip about 23 acres out the south of the golf course. So the architect they choose to do the work is named Larry Packard. And he's in town for two reasons. He's going to build a course that's called Blank Golf Course on the south side of Des Moines. And he has a country club lined up on the south side called Echo Valley. So he's already in town. They figure, why don't we just have him fix this Waveland issue? Because 3 of our holes are going to be gone. I call it his side gig. I don't think this was the reason he was in Des Moines, but he got the job at Waveland. A little bit about him. He built 200 courses, around 200 courses. He was based in Illinois. He's respected, but his courses tend to look the same. He was building a lot of courses at probably 20 or 30 a year at his high point. So it's kind of a cut and paste. How can we quickly build this? So his job, he has a very difficult job. It's how do you cheaply fix this problem? You have the interstate cutting through these holes. How do you cheaply reconstruct the course? Because we still want to have 18 holes. So they have a wad of cash to do the work. They don't use most of it, which is, I don't know why. I think the city kept a lot of the money they got from the Highway Commission when they bought the land. There was an earlier article about, before Coates came, someone had written into the register and said, I'm glad they're not taking half measures and they're bringing in someone to redo the course. But it's really clear in this era that you're going to take a half measure because we got to fix this problem. And we want to do it cheaply. And I think I'm going to get to this next slide. Yeah. They want to keep as many of the holes as possible, which it's really difficult to do because once you change one golf hole, it tends to affect the whole golf course. So when you move around a tee or you change one thing, it ends up, there's a chain reaction and it changes maybe 6 holes and you thought you were just changing one. So he keeps 12 of Coates' holes. He goes into this corner of the course that hadn't been used that was called picnic grounds originally when we looked at it earlier. And he kind of forces 3 golf holes onto that land. And he adds bunkers, and I'm not sure why, because it's really expensive to maintain bunkers. But so what he does, here's Coates' course. Interstate's going to chop this off, essentially. So if you look at the aerial and think, well, where are we going to find 3 golf holes on a smaller property? Well, the woods. So that's his strategy. It's take 3 holes from down here and try to force them into it's a very severe wooded area. And they did. So they built today's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th holes into this forested area. It also has a really big creek in it, and the hillsides there are very, very, very steep. So this is probably getting a little bit too detailed, but here's another topographical map of just the 2nd green. And you can see there was a natural hillside here that they kind of just cut a flat spot into. And that's how they built in this pretty severe forest. Was we're going to measure how far we want this hole to be, and we're just going to make a cut into the hillside. And that was their strategy for building those 3 holes. The issue is this changes the course dramatically. You now are traversing the most up and down area of the course. And you're playing through very tight spaces into wet areas. So it's hard to grow grass. It's hard to walk. Changes the course a lot. And the way they market these changes are that Waveland's getting tougher, which is also strange because it's a municipal golf course that's supposed to introduce people to the game. Here's an article where they're talking about hoard your balls because you're going to lose them all now, which is it's a very strange. I mean, it was marketed as very tough at that time, but you're telling people you're going to struggle before they even get out there, which is an interesting strategy. They flipped the 9s in the 70s because they want to sell more beer. So you had, well, I'll try to find a photo here. You had, let's see. That might not do it, but we'll try. Sorry about the waiting. Anyway, they flipped the 9s, so you have to cross the clubhouse after 9 holes. So you can stop and buy more drinks. So it used to be you played the 9th hole and then went to the 10th hole. And then you went around the back 9 and you finished on 18. I guess they weren't making enough money, so they flipped the 9s. So now you start here. This is your 9th hole, and you cross the clubhouse and play 10, which isn't a bad change, but it's significant because you talk about the holes you know, and this just flips the order of the 9s. So we can recap this era. More Americans want to play golf. Like I said, 19 new courses in the metro alone. Waveland gets whittled away by the new interstate. I didn't really touch on this, but I could more. The business of running the course changes. Today the money is made renting carts. So a lot of the improvements for the course actually go into pavement. They don't actually go into the golf. And that's a big change that's happened in the industry. It's not necessarily Waveland, but the golf, in my mind, is kind of taking a back seat to selling beer and renting carts. So if we compare the golf course to Victorian iteration or the Golden Age iteration, in my mind, it's less about exercise. We talked about, Victorian golfers wanted to get out in fresh air and go exercise. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think we want to go drive the golf carts around.
That lets more people golf. It gets more people.
True.
Gets
True.
more people through when they have a
Yeah,
cart,
true.
which is what the golf course wants.
But the priorities when it was built was exercise. So, yeah. And then I think it's significant that Waveland might get some of its biggest use days in the winter, when people are sledding, skiing. And as we looked at the first iteration of the course, you had an open park picnic area. And there was this idea that you were at the park, maybe you play golf. Now no one in the summers, all they're doing is playing golf. So in my mind, it's become a little bit more closed off. I want to read one more thing to end on a more positive note. This is a little history that I wrote about Waveland, and this is the final section. And I call Waveland the quintessential Iowa golf course because if you figure 50,000 people play it a year, 50,000 rounds, over 100 years, it's gotten 5 million rounds. I can't imagine any course in Iowa getting that many. So it really is the quintessential golf experience for our state. So Waveland is still one of the most popular courses in Iowa. Its tradition is supported by a strong contingent of men's league and women's leagues, local universities, Des Moines public schools, and a faithful clientele. Waveland's layout has changed marginally since 1970, and many of the issues that Packard instituted, many of the persistent issues the course faces today were caused by the Packard redesign in I-235. Despite these challenges, it's a beloved golf course. It's a foundational green park in the middle of the city, and it's a leading institution for golf in the state. So that's all I have.
Thank you. When did Waveland start playing golf?
That's not quite clear, but I think at Waveland's opening, I think it was always men and women playing golf at Waveland. Yeah. Switch it to this slide.
Cross country, skiing.
Yeah.
trails.
Yep.
I don't know how many exactly use it, but. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Next month, the next Iowa Files will be on Sunday, November 20th. Between 1854 and 1929, approximately 200,000 children were taken from cities such as New York and Boston, put on trains, and brought out to the Midwest to be adopted. Sometimes that went well, oftentimes it did not. So historian Carol Bodensteiner will be here to talk about the history and the repercussions of the orphan trains. So thank you again for coming today, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks.
What's the cost to go walk into the